We are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret society, opposed to secret oaths, opposed to secret proceedings, secret proceedings. No official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Welcome to Conspiracy Corner Podcast, everyone. This is Abe, your host. It is July 28th, 2024, 11 a.m. Haven't done an episode on Leave the World Behind in a little bit. There's just been a lot going on in the conspiracy world. So let's get into it. Yeah, there's been a lot of stuff as far as that's been cut out of, well, not cut out of the book, but that was added in the movie. I feel like every iconic scene that's been in the movie has not been in the book. And I'm the type, I've been pre-drawing title pages and stuff for the channel of stuff that was in the movie and it's not been in the book. It's kind of strange. Hopefully you're still enjoying the read-along with commentary, though. But, Chapter 17. The sun crept across the sky as ever it had. They welcomed it. They worshipped it. The prickle on the skin felt like punishment. The sweat felt like virtue. Cups collected on the table. Towels were used and abandoned. There were sighs and feints towards conversation. There was a plash of water and the sound of the door opening and closing. It was the kind of heat you could almost hear. And in that kind of heat, what could you do but swim? Amanda worried fresh sunscreen into her chest and could feel the stuff of herself, ropey and fibrous, beneath her skin. It was an improvisation. Someone in the audience shadows had shouted out this scenario. It made no sense, and she had the task with performing as though it did. Clay driving into town, she was doing this. She thought of that movie where the man pretended for his son that life under the Nazis was normal, beautiful even. Something about that seemed prescient now that she thought about it. You could fake your way to a lot. Ruth told the children that there were pool floats in the garage. They returned with sagging plastic mini Oldenburgs. Archie put the little nub between his lips. It was meant to look like a donut sprinkled with a bite taken out of it. The effort of exhaustion exposing the filigree of his ribs. It was so unfair how much capable Archie was. 3 years of advantage. Rose couldn't get a single breath into her float, which was just a round raft, but looked comfortable. It was annoying. Archie was basically a grown-up, and she was stuck being just herself. I'll do it, honey. Amanda took the limp thing between her legs, perched on the edge of the wooden chase, coaxed it into shape. I like the donut one better. Nothing went her way, and she couldn't stop herself from noting it. Too slow, stupid. Archie tossed the ring onto the surface of the pool. He bounced from the diving board, landing only half on the thing, as though he'd meant to. He was unbothered by his sister's protest, had long learned enough how to ignore most of the things his sister had to say. The raft is more comfortable. Rose was the short of plain, chubby girl. Ruth couldn't help feel sorry for her. Ruth thought Archie so like every boy she had seen troop through the halls of her school, convinced of his own charms. Maybe this was something mothers did to sons. She worried about her grandsons, mothered, smothered twice over. Rose was old enough to know how to feign matters. Still, she whined. But the donut is funny. Rose spoke in that particular mode kids deploy when appealing to adults who are not their parents. Funny is no good in the long run. At the umbrellaed table, Ruth crossed her legs. She wore her clean things. She'd stalked into the master bedroom, wincing at the unmade bed. The spent washcloths on the bathroom floor, the scattered dirty laundry. She felt better, almost relaxed. This is harder than it looks. Amanda thought of Clay's cigarettes stealing her breath. She knew it wasn't fair not to have a vice. The modern world was so joyless. When had they turned into parents to each other? Rose was impatient as any 13-year-old. Mom, hurry. She pulled the translucent nipple, shining with saliva, from her mouth. Here you go. That was good enough. Rose stood on the steps, tepid water to her shins. She and Archie vanished into their game, the private conspiracy of childhood. Children sided with one another, the future against the past. Amanda often thought that siblings were like long-married couples, all those shorthand arguments. This endured only in childhood. She had little to do with her brothers beyond the occasional too-long email from her older brother, Brian, the rare misspelled text messages from her younger brother, Jason. How long has it been? How long has he been gone? Amanda checked her phone. At least the clock was working. 20 minutes? GH at his own watch. It was that long into town, more if you drove slowly, as a man who didn't know the place might. He'll be back soon. Should I make lunch? Amanda was less hungry than bored. I can help. Ruth was already on her feet. How to discern even to her whether she wanted to or felt she had to. She did like cooking, but was that because convention forced her into the kitchen until she'd learned to enjoy time spent there? The more the merrier. Amanda didn't want the woman's company, but maybe it would distract her from thinking about her husband. It was cooler inside, though Ruth had adjusted the thermostat so that it wasn't too cold. She felt this was wasteful. You shouldn't worry, you know. This was kindness. Amanda understood. Clay had bought brie and chocolate. There were sandwiches, a particular favorite of Rose's, a recipe he used to make on New Year's Day. For some reason, traditions just begin, somehow. Then they end. I'll warn you, this recipe sounds odd, but it's so good. She laid out the ingredients. Ruth was the one who submerged the Thanksgiving bird in the salty water. She was the one who stretched bacon on the rack and let it crisp in the oven. She was the one who used the knife to sunder the flesh from the grapefruit's membranes. This was her room. Chocolate? Amanda looked at the things arrayed on the counter, each individual chocolate chip, somehow lovely. The soft wedge of cheese remarkable, salty and sweet. Some kind of magic there. Opposites attract, I guess. Was Ruth flirting? Maybe she was. Were she and Amanda actually opposites? Random circumstance had brought them together, but wasn't everything random circumstance in the end? She chopped basil. Ruth filled a bucket with ice. She produced cloth napkins, folded them into precise squares, and laid these out on a tray. Amanda sniffed the fragrant tips of her fingers. You're the gardener? You won't catch George doing any of that old people stuff. Ruth thought her more grandmotherly inclinations. The crossword, gardening, fat paperback histories of the Tudors didn't seem evidence of anything. She was just a woman who liked what she liked. She wasn't old. Amanda tried to guess. He's in law? No, finance. No, law. She thought the expensive watch and neatly groomed salt and pepper hair and fine spectacles and luxurious shoes explained just what type of man GH was. Private equity. Should I slice this cheese? Ruth had explained this before many times. It still meant very little to her. So what? GH didn't understand the particulars of what she had done at Dalton. Maybe no one, however much in love, cares about the minute of someone else's life. So finance, you could say, but not for a big bank. A small firm, a boutique operation. This was her way of explaining it to people who were as confused as she was. Just slice it thin for a grilled sandwich. They had enough for 4, but not precisely enough for 6. She'd make one and leave it aside for Clay. For no reason but thinking of him, tears welled up in her eyes. She wanted the news he would bring, but also she just wanted him back. At least the children are enjoying themselves. Ruth didn't want these people here, and she couldn't help but feel some human connection to them. Ruth worried about the world, but to care for other people felt something close to resistance. Maybe this was all they had. Amanda melted butter in the black skillet. There's that. Archie was almost a man. A century ago, he had been sent to the trenches of Europe. She should tell him what was happening, and what she should tell him if she did. I found this onion dip, maybe as a snack. Ruth took out a bowl and a big spoon and worked in silence. Amanda could not bear it, and she broke it. What do you think is happening out there? Your husband will be back soon. He'll find out something. Ruth tasted the dip with her pinky, an elegant gesture. She didn't want to play guessing games. She suspected Amanda didn't believe them. Ruth didn't want to be embarrassed. Amanda removed a finished sandwich. My kids rely on their phones to tell them how the weather is, to tell them what time it is, everything about the world around them. They can't even see the world anymore, but through that prism. But even Amanda did this. She mocked the television commercial in which Zooey Deschanel seemed not to know whether it was raining, but she'd done the very same thing. Without our phones, it turns out we are basically marooned out here. That's what it was. The feeling was withdrawal. On planes, she turned off airplane mode and started trying to check her email once you heard the ding that meant you were fewer than 10,000 feet aloft. The flight attendants were buckled in and couldn't scold. She'd pull and pull and pull and pull at the screen, waiting for the connection to be established, waiting to see what she had missed. You'll believe it when you see it on your phone. Ruth didn't even blame her for this. All these years debating the objectivity of fact had done something to everyone's brains. We just don't know anything. I'll feel better once we do. Do you think it's taken Clay a long time? Ruth put the dirty spoon in the sink. There's an old idea. You're trapped on a desert island. You're far from society and people. Maybe you have to choose the 10 books or records that you can take with you. Sort of makes the thing seem like paradise instead of a trap. A desert island sounded nice to her. Though the seas were rising, maybe all such islands would vanish. But I don't have 10 books. If we had the internet, I could get into my account and download all the books I've bought for myself for my Kindle. But we don't have that. What she didn't say. We have the pool, these brie and chocolate sandwiches. And though they were strangers to another, sure, we have one another too. Chapter 18. Amanda brought out wine. It was vacation also. The hair of the dog. When the children complained, it was too early to eat. Amanda let them vanish into their game, relieved. She poured pale pink wine into acrylic glasses and handed them around. Ceremonial, almost religious. Someone attentive and patient had pressed the cloth napkins. She wondered if it had been Ruth. Your children are so polite. G.H. considered this the highest of praise. Thank you. Amanda was not sure this was not flattery, or just something to say, but she was pleased. You've got a daughter? Maya. She teaches Montessori in Massachusetts. G.H. still wasn't entirely certain what this entailed, but he adored her. She runs the school. She doesn't just teach. She's in charge of the whole operation. Ruth bit into a baby carrot. She felt light. Maybe some part of her remembered reading once that people with fatal diagnoses entered a period of remission, calm, almost good health. Once that's been established, a honeymoon, an interlude of joy. That's wonderful. We used to send Archie to a Montessori when he was small. It was amazing. Changing into their inside shoes, washing hands, saying good morning like colleagues at the office. She loved how he'd referred to play as work. Those bumbling toddlers practicing for adulthood by lifting glass beads with a teaspoon, sponging up lunchtime spills. They say it's important for development. Maya is very passionate about it. The boys will start there. Goodness. It's only a couple of weeks, I suppose it'll be. Ruth was defensive. It can't be already. G.H. knew that every cliche turned out to be true, that they do, in fact, grow up fast. September, Ruth said it with hope. Her mother would have brought God into it, God willing, a reflex like drawing breath. They hadn't scorned it, but they hadn't learned that woman's devotion. Maybe she was on to something. Maybe it was a folly to assume anything happened without someone. God? Sure. Why not him? Willing it. Why did Amanda think of the earth, wind, and fire song? Or why did she seem racist? No, some of her best friends were not black. The friend, Peter, was married to a woman named Martika, whose mother had been a famous black model in the 1970s. Their neighbor on the ground floor was black, but also transgender or non-binary, or Amanda always referred to this person by name just to be safe. Jordan, so good to see you, Jordan. How is your summer going? Jordan, it's been so hot out lately. It does fly by. Older parents always said that to me when Archie was a baby. And I would think, well, I can't wait for this to go by because I was exhausted. But now I realize they were right. She was babbling. I was about to say as much to you. You beat me to it. I remember Maya at this age. G.H. was wistful, but also he was worried. They'd had fine lives, long lives, happy lives. Maya and her family were the only thing that it amounted to, of course, and that was something. A father should protect, and as he'd driven the night before, he'd worked through what he might do for her from a distance of Long Island and realized there wasn't much. But Maya wasn't the one who needed help. They were. Maya and the boys were fine. Ruth wondered what version of the girl was in her husband's mind. By the way, what is a Montessori? I'm going to have to look that up. She didn't want to ask. It was too private in front of this stranger. It was odd enough that they were all sitting there in their swimsuits. Okay, I looked it up. It was alternative teaching. That basically kind of like relaxed teaching to let kids learn through more of like activities and interest and stuff. It was fun to be grandparents. You get to do all the spoiling and don't have to get up all night or scold them for bad report cards or whatever. Amanda's own parents just discharged that office with indifference. They didn't they didn't dislike Archie and Rose, but they didn't dote upon them. They were two of 7 cousins, and her parents had retired to Santa Fe, where her father painted terrible landscapes and her mother volunteered at a dog shelter. They were determined to enjoy the liberty of their age, and that strange and in that strange place where it took longer for water to boil. These sandwiches are good. Ruth had doubted they would be, as she wanted to a change of subject. The truth was, Maya guarded Beckett and Otto. She thought her parents feeble or conservative, unable to comprehend the philosophy of it, what she and Clara had agreed upon. Ruth would come bearing bags from books of wonder, and Maya would pore over them like a rabbi, searching out their sins. It was well intentioned. Her distrust was not of her parents, but of the world that they had made, and maybe she was right. Ruth could not resist buying them adorable things like gingham shirts, like you'd put onto a teddy bear, and Maya would try to conceal her disdain. No matter, Ruth just wanted to be humored and hold the boys' clean smelling bodies close against her own. It was remarkable how that made her feel. Invincible. They are good, G.H. agreed. Well, we do some spoiling, she allowed, when we get the chance. That's what she wanted, the chance to see her family. Amanda no longer thought they were con men, but was this a precursor to dementia? The first warning sign? Life keys left in the refrigerator, or socks worn into the shower, or thinking Reagan was still president. Wasn't that how it worked? First fiction, then paranoia, then Alzheimer's. She felt the same way about her parents. Their volition seemed suspect. They'd moved to Santa Fe after skiing in New Mexico once or twice a decade earlier. It made no sense to her, and their contentment seemed a bit like delusion. It was the whole point of being a grandparent. George is worse than I am. Wait, she was more rude than she'd meant to be, and gave the people a sheepish look. I just realized, your name is George Washington? There was no particular shame in it. He'd been explaining it for 60+ years. My name is George Herman Washington. I'm sorry, that was rude of me. It was the wine, maybe. It's just that it seems somehow fitting. She couldn't explain it, but maybe it was self-evident. Someday there would be an anecdote, and the time she sat with a black man named George Washington while her husband went forth to figure out what had gone wrong in the world. They'd traded their disaster stories the night before, and this would just be one more of those. No apologies necessary. Part of the reason I settled on using my initials early in my career. It's a fine name. Ruth was not insulted, just marveled at the familiarity with which the woman talked to them. She knew it made her sound even more like an old woman, but she missed a sense of propriety about things. It is that, a fine name, and wonderful initials. I think G.H. sounds like a captain of industry, a master of his business. I would trust a G.H. with my money. Amanda was overcompensating now, but also a little tipsy. The wine, the heat, the strangeness. Clay should be back soon, don't you think? She looked at her wrist, but was not wearing her watch. Chapter 19. The children were bored by their leisure. outnumbered. Archie and Rose rediscovered some connection, were again a 5-year-old and 2-year-old cooperating towards some unstated goal. They left the pool, left the grown-ups, were into the grass, the shade, the relief of the pool had not been. Let's go into the woods, Archie. She thought about what she had seen. It didn't make sense even to her. I saw something this morning. Deer. They're everywhere, dumbass. They're like squirrels or pigeons. Who cares? She wasn't terrible, his sister, but she was still a little kid, so she couldn't help being a dumbass. Had he been that stupid at 13? No, I mean, like, come on. Rose looked over her shoulder at the adults eating lunch. She couldn't say, please, because begging would turn him off. She had to make it sound appealing. She wanted to pretend they were exploring, but they actually would be exploring, so it wasn't even a game. Let's see what's out there. There's nothing out there. Still, he kind of wondered what was out there. Indian arrowheads, money, strangers. He'd found in various woods he'd visited in life some weird shit. 3 pages torn from a dirty magazine, a lady with old-fashioned hair, tan skin, immense boobs, pouting and bending her body this way and that. A dollar bill, a jar filled with not quite clear liquid. He was sure it was piss, but didn't know how to prove that, because he didn't want to open the jar that might contain someone else's piss. There was mysteries in the world, was all Rosie was saying, and he knew it, but didn't want to hear it from her. What if maybe there's a house back there? She was imagining something as yet unclear even to her. There's no other houses anywhere near here. Archie said it like he couldn't believe it, or like he regretted it. He understood. He was bored too. There's that farm. We saw them selling the eggs, remember? Maybe those farmers had kids. Maybe they had a daughter. Maybe her name was Kayla or Chelsea or Madison. And maybe she had her own phone. Maybe she had money or an idea of something that would be fun to do. Maybe she'd invite them inside and it would be air conditioned. And they would play video games and eat Fritos and drink Diet Coke with ice cubes in it. Rose was hot and itchy. She wanted to go into the woods with her brother, to go where the adults couldn't see them, or bother them. She'd imagined evidence out there, footprints, tracks, proof. Archie retrieved a stick from the ground, heaved it into the trees like a javelin. Kids loved sticks the way dogs did. Take a kid to the park and they'd pick up a stick. Some kind of animal response. There's a swing, cool. It hung from a tall tree. There was a small shed that could have been a playhouse or full of tools. Beyond, the grass ebbed until there was nothing but dirt and trees. Rose trotted toward it and sat. Archie swore and felt like a man complaining about the knots and rocks under his feet. Shit. What's in that thing? Something about the shed made Rose cautious. Anything could be inside it. Rose had started pretending, or she'd never stopped pretending. Let's open it up and see. Archie sounded confident, but privately shared his sister's awe at the thing. It could have been the playhouse of some kind, who was dead now. There could be a person inside it, waiting for them to open the door. It was something from a movie, or that kind of story they didn't want their life stories to be. The adults were behind the fence. It was like they ceased to be. Rose hopped from the swing and stepped toward the little structure. She broke a spider web, invisible until it was not. Felt that terrible shiver you do in the moment. The body knew what it was doing. It was scaring you away in case the spider was poisonous. She'd told herself not to scream. Her brother had no patience for girly things like that. A sound emerged all the same, a kind of strangled disgust. What? Archie looked at his sister, some concern mixed with his disdain. That, too, was an animal response. The big brother's. Spider web. She thought of Charlotte's Web. She knew spiders did not have human personalities and voices, but worried about the spider she might have displaced. Could not but imagine it a kindly female spider. She did not know that she had limned generosity with femininity, part of the morale of that particular story. She did not know that her mother objected to that. When rereading it aloud a few years ago, when they were small enough to be read to at night. The boy and the girl moved together through the thick grass, their bodies near naked and pinked from the sun, prickled from the cooler air beneath the boughs, goose-fleshed from the spider's silk, and the fear that was the best part of exploration, seen from far away. They looked as the fawns did when you saw them early in the morning, young, hesitant, ungainly, but graceful for being only what they were. Archie thought, but did not say, pussy. It was a reflexive response to the perception of weakness, but she was his little sister. Open it. Rose hesitated and then did not. She had to be brave. That was the game. There was the kind of notch you depress with your thumb over a handle. She gripped, but lightly. The metal was weathered, and the touch felt charged. Rose pulled open the door, which made a loud creak. Inside, nothing, a scattering of dried leaves in the corner that looked almost deliberate. Rose's heart was thudding so that she could hear it. Oh, she was a little disappointed, though she couldn't say what she had expected to find in there. Archie ducked his head into the building, but did not enter it. This stupid fucking place is so boring. Yeah. Rose dug into the ground with a toenail that had been painted with pale blue weeks before. Now Archie understood it was an improvisatory game. Maybe this is just where he sleeps, though, where he hides at night. Immediately afraid. Who? He shrugged his shoulders. Whoever made that impression. Archie pointed at the leaves, which had once been wet, but had dried into a thick, contorted surface. I mean, if you were in these woods, with nowhere to go and no place to sleep, what would you do? She didn't want to think about it. What do you mean? You couldn't, climb a tree and sleep up there, but anywhere on the ground would be, unsafe. Snakes and shit like that. Rabid animals, 4 walls, and a roof. It's basically luxurious. And there's this window. Archie gestured at the dirty pane cut into the side of the shed, with which he had noticed until they opened it. Yeah, I guess. She definitely wouldn't want to sleep outside. She couldn't imagine sleeping in the branches of a tree. She didn't think she could even climb a tree. They'd done rock climbing at Park Slope Day camp a couple years ago. She'd been tethered at her waist, had worn a helmet and knee pads, but still refused to go on halfway up the wall, hanging there shrieking until her counselor, Darnell, worked the rope to get her back down. Archie paused meaningfully. So he can see. See what? Archie bent back into the shed, looked through the window. Into the house, of course. See for yourself. There's a perfect view. Rose stepped forward, recoiling a little at the bare dirt under her feet. She did not have to bend. She was not as tall as her brother, but she did. Her hand on his forearm to steady her. She could, in fact, see the house from that vantage. He went on, Isn't that the room you're sleeping in? Wow. Correct me if I'm wrong, but pretty sure it is. Just imagine when it's dark out here, but the house is all lit up. Your little bedside lamp is glowing, and you're reading nice and cozy under your covers. He could just follow that light right up to you. I bet you could see right in the windows without even having to stand on tiptoe. She pulled her body back, knocking her head against the threshold. "Shut up, Archie." He stifled a laugh. "Just shut up." She folded her arms against her chest. "Listen, this morning I saw a deer. Not a deer, a lot of deer. 100, maybe more, right here. It was so weird. Do they go around in big groups like that?" Archie walked toward the tree in whose shade the little playhouse was nestled. He reached up and leapt just slightly, took hold of his lowest limbs, lifted his knees to his chest, and swung, animal and mischievous. He dropped to the ground with a thud. He spat into the dust. "I don't fucking know anything about fucking deer." Peach-colored fuzz sticky, their bodies dissolved into the foliage. They couldn't be seen, heard, spied as they investigated. They wanted something to happen, but something was happening. They did not know it, and it did not involve them, not really. It would, of course. The world belonged to the young. They were babes in the woods, and if the tale were to be believed, they would die. The birds would see their bodies, maybe escort their souls to heaven. Depended on which version of the story you knew. The dark that had settled on Manhattan, that tangible thing, could be explained. But beyond the dark was everything else, and that was more vague, hard to hold on to as spider's silk. They're not there. All around them, they walked farther into the woods. So that was chapter 19. He's supposed to get bit by a tick. That's in the movie, but not in the book. Like I said at the beginning, it seems like every part I remember in the movie is just not in the book. So I'm guessing that was Obama's choice. But I hope you all enjoyed. Please like, share, and subscribe, and tune in for more.
We are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret society, opposed to secret oaths, opposed to secret proceedings, secret proceedings. No official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.